Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for April 19th, 2023. It's sometimes difficult to imagine the depths of delusion and arrogance of the so-called Western leaders as they plot out their plans to protect their privilege of the unipolar order in the face of tremendous turbulence internationally. But one of these ongoing examples of this is the foreign ministers meeting of the G7, which is taking place in Japan right now. Imagine sitting among your fellow foreign ministers and listening to Anthony Blinken discussing such things as our common cause, our great mission to defend democracy, the need to remain unified for Ukrainian victory, the necessity for unity to confront Russia and China. Does he think that the people he's talking to don't know about events that have come out in recent weeks and months that show what a fraud he is and what a fraud this idea of our common destiny and common purpose? Does he think they don't know about the doubts about a Ukrainian victory that were just expressed in these documents from the Pentagon? Does he think they don't know that the U.S. is spying on them? This is also part of the release of these documents. Does he think they don't know the U.S. sabotaged the Nord Stream pipelines, which has had a profound effect on energy inflation in the European sector? Does he think that they don't know that the IMF in its April meeting that just concluded reported as part of their World Economic Outlook that China is the world's fastest growing economy, India is the world's second fastest economy, and that the BRICS nations are now providing more economic growth for the world than the G7? Does he think they're ignorant about that? And as the West is sinking under debt, inflation, and banking crises, there are moves led by BRICS members to establish new banks and lending facilities to fund development under the topic of de-dollarization and putting an end to the neo-colonial order called the unipolar order. Does he think they don't know that? And do the journalists who write down doggedly every remark from Blinken and these guys, do they think their readers are blind and ignorant to the changes going on in history today? Well, it's not unrecognized by some in that circle. There's some examples of this. For example, Janet Yellen, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, former Federal Reserve Chairman. Yellen said that U.S. sanctions are undermining the dollar and trust in the United States. You think so? Larry Summers, once considered an economic guru, he defended U.S. economic policies, but he complained that it is, quote, lonely being on the right side of history, unquote. In other words, watching everyone jump off the sinking ship. That makes him lonely. Or the European Central Bank President, Christine Lagarde, former IMF director, warning of fragmentation and the breakdown of order caused in part, she said, by financial sanctions of the last decade. Yet even as they acknowledge these tensions and these transitions, they push for the same policy, which includes more IMF control, the Great Reset, more power to the central banks and the private banks over the nations, less sovereignty for nations to make decisions. And on top of that, a push for economic decoupling with Russia and China, two of the leaders in the BRICS movement that is actually achieving economic development while the West is tumbling over the waterfall. Now, they keep pushing, though, for more economic decoupling, more confrontation, and of course, with Russia and China, more war. This is something which is really, this is why I say this is LaLa Land. They don't know what they're doing, or if they do, they're hoping they can be crazy enough. This is the Dr. Strangelove idea, crazy enough to convince Russia and China to submit to their demands to give up their sovereignty or else face nuclear war. And then they turn around and say Russia and China are the ones pushing nuclear war. Well, let me give you a more insight into the psychosis of the people who are drafting Western policy. This is an Atlantic Council think tank memo to NATO leaders. The Atlantic Council is an American-British hybrid, which is funded by both the State Department, the British Foreign Office, as well as many of the corporate think tanks that are responsible for the bad policies that are destroying civilization. This memo was co-authored by none other than Ian Brzezinski, the son of the mad geopolitician Zbigniew Brzezinski, and his themes of clash of civilization. And this is for the Vilnius NATO summit, which will take place in July. There are a number of points in this memo, and I'll just read you some of them. The NATO must go beyond articulation of transatlantic solidarity against Russia. In other words, not just talk, but action. Point number 2, we must fortify NATO's defenses on the eastern flank. More troops, more bases, more weapons on the border with Russia. What do you think was the driver behind Putin's decision that he had to draw the line by making sure that Ukraine was not brought into NATO? A third point, fully endorse Ukraine's war aims, which are not just to take back the Donbass, but to take back the area of Crimea. This would mean ongoing fighting, probably for many, many years, if it wouldn't trigger a nuclear war. And by the way, there are some in British intelligence who have talked about a Crimean missile crisis, comparing it to Cuba, that it could be the trigger for a Russian response. They talk about expanding economic sanctions against Russia. What more can they do? It hasn't really worked very well, has it? They also call for more military support for Ukraine. And in order to do that, they say we must increase the spending on military production in the advanced sector. Well, that's, at the United States, it's over $900 billion in this next year's budget. How much more can be spent on that? If you keep spending more, you're not going to have enough to bail out the bankrupt banks. And finally, they reassert that NATO must move to bring Ukraine into NATO as a full member. Now, this is the Biden, City of London commitment to permanent warfare. That's what this strategy is about. It's not about freedom and democracy in Ukraine. It's about protecting a collapsing unipolar order, which does not allow nations to act in the sovereign interests of their own people, but keeps them under pressure with a gun to their head to back up the unipolar order, which benefits primarily the corporate cartels of the West. And the arrogance is that this is supposedly our common cause for democracy, or as expressed famously by Germany's Foreign Minister Baerbock, we're going to continue this war no matter what my German voters think. Now, if you agree with me that this is a commitment to suicide for Western nations, then join our organization and join our campaign for a new strategic and development architecture. We have plenty of material on this on our websites, both the schillerinstitute.com and the LaRouche organization. And I will again put a link for our conference last weekend, which was an extraordinary dialogue among leaders of, I think, 25 to 30 nations who were talking about what must be done to move out of this zone of uncertainty and confrontation into an era of peaceful cooperation and development. So do yourself and mankind a favor and watch these videos to see what real deliberation is, and join our fight to turn the United States back into an anti-colonial power, fighting for the good of our own people as well as the common interests of all other nations. Thank you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Hello, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, You'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and weekly magazine, which is what I read to stay on top of things.